is joining us from Hong Kong. He's the Lego Professor of Management and Innovation at IMD Business School. Great to have you back on the show, Howard. Thanks for staying up late to chat with us. So right now, Netflix, thank you, under pressure. What do you think of this report here? Market seems to be maybe a little concerned about how far it's run.
Right. If you're looking at the report yesterday, the major hiccup is really this idea that going forward in Q3, Netflix basically revised its guidance in terms of subscriber growth. So in a way, that is a big concern by the market because the future growth, if it turns out to be smaller than what people expected, obviously people are not going to be very happy with the share price right now. But in a way, I think this is fairly smart on the part of Netflix right now because essentially this is about managing expectations from the market. But like it or not, Netflix is the one who are winning the streaming wars. We have all kinds of new entrants coming into this crowded space, and no doubt Netflix is going to win over time.
Seems like we did learn that. The Quibi launch has flopped. The Peacock launch, people are already complaining about how quickly some of the titles expired. Obviously, Disney Plus has been the one a lot of folks were getting nervous about in terms of competitive force for Netflix. So what did we learn during this quarantine? Are they two different demographics? Are they competing? Is it a threat to Netflix?
No, this is kind of interesting, right? Because during the quarantine, what we're seeing is almost this accelerant to streaming. This is why over the past 6 months, Netflix basically grow the subscriber base at almost the same amount as they grow back in last year as well. So right now, what we're seeing is Netflix certainly is the leader of the space, quickly followed by Amazon Video Prime. But even for Disney Plus, which is the third largest one, is about a third of the user base compared with Netflix. So what we're talking about is really a two-tier market. You have the top tier, which are digital-based, software-first, AI-driven organization. And then you have the rest of the pack, essentially a traditional company, entertainment company, trying to enter the streaming business. If history is a guide, I would suggest it's only going to be the software-based, AI-driven organization going to win this game, because it's only that type of operating model would allow you to scale as fast as the market demand would be.
So with the scale, do we know that Netflix, as it exists right now, their model for revenue, for earnings, is it going to be enough, that scale, to justify the prices, to justify the expectations, or will they need to add in some advertising component? Will they need to cut the amount that they're spending on these programs that have been just so widespread, so many different shows, the purchases of old shows? I mean, if they are on top, do they need to keep spending at this rate, or do they need to keep spending and then maybe find a way to generate more revenue through advertising?
That's interesting because as I was traveling from Switzerland to Hong Kong, at the airport I see people streaming from Netflix. It's like really, truly become international these days. But fundamentally, if you're looking at Netflix model, it's really a matchmaker compared to Disney Plus or other kind of streaming businesses. So for Netflix, this AI algo is really powerful. They take pictures and moments inside a film and then match with customers. So even back in 2016, Netflix would tell us essentially inside Netflix, they have over 33 million versions of Netflix to cater at about 133 million users. It's just extreme customizations of user experience that drive growth. Now, can it be scaled? Certainly, I think, because if you're thinking about Netflix operating model, is everything they do is to come up with an algo. Humans are only designing the algo and the software and for deployment. That is what makes Netflix so powerful. To a large extent, that's the same setting for Amazon Prime. Compare and contrast to whether it's Apple TV Plus or Disney Plus. These are the more traditional or device-driven company that historically are not software first. This is where the scalability differs.
I like this point, and really it sounds like Amazon, the only major threat to them at the moment right now. If Netflix does retain this kind of bedrock of the streaming, the position out in front, what does that mean for the prices on the stock? I mean, what's a tolerable valuation? How do we know over the last month how much of that accelerating characteristic of coronavirus got beyond itself in terms of what the market's going to tolerate?
I know, right? I mean, at IMD, when I talk to executives, we always see the COVID-19 crisis as an accelerant to business trend. So what used to be 5, 6 years later down the road would happened today in 2020. And this is why streaming is so big, e-commerce so big. So the question is Netflix expensive or cheap to buy? So let's look at PE, right? PE ratio-wise, right now Netflix is about 104. So Disney, in comparison, is cheap buy, it's like 40. But if you're looking at Amazon, it's 140. So I would suggest like if there's any adjustment, the direction is going upwards. So there's still headroom for growth. And if you're looking at market percentage around the world, right, the penetration is not that big yet. So unlike mobile phone, the penetration is huge. For streaming, it's still at the upstart phase. So, there's lots and lots of headroom for growth.
Yeah. Just to go back to your point about the AI, what do you expect to see then, Howard? Your point here is that they have so much data about what we enjoy, or were they going to have specific types of films for certain demographics and target audience? Are they going to have more interaction like they had when they tried a few shows where you could actually kind of respond to the programming? What's the next step then you want to see to really take advantage of all the data?
So the broad trend these days in entertainment sector is really this geographic localization. And I mean, this is pretty broad trend, right? As the world continue to fracture, tech company really need to pick side or play different parts of the world with different playbook. And so Netflix truly know the taste of people in India would differ from people in Hong Kong, where I'm sitting in right now, and also very different than Europe and the United States. So I think going forward with all this data gleaming through, you would expect what Netflix is going to do when they produce their own content is to even go one step further in terms of localization, allowing the producer and the director to glean over the data analytics they have, so that not to replace human creativity, but simply to make creative decision based on evidence, what would work and what would not. After all, in terms of the image, the thumbnail that they represent to us on the Netflix interface, they already done so. So the next step is to going into content development, just using a bit of data analytics, just to step ahead with other studio in terms of hit to market, then Netflix could easily make a huge win.
Howard, great to catch up. Really like the thoughts here. A good take on Netflix. Appreciate you joining us.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Howard Yu, Izzy Lego, Professor of Management and Innovation at IMD Business School, with some exciting thoughts on how Netflix can continue to innovate.